That morning in the military courtroom, when Rachel Monroe walked in with sagging hair and hollowed eyes, Judge Chambers glanced up and chuckled. Silent, huh? Good. Then, just sit there and take notes. The courtroom snickered along, treating her like a nameless shadow. But when the legal argument hit a dead end, Rachel simply bowed her head and whispered 4 words. And the judge shot to his feet, face drained like he'd just heard a death sentence. It wasn't a statement. It was a call sign, the kind only those who've done the unforgivable are terrified to hear. Rachel sat at the far end of the table, her wrinkled blouse tucked unevenly into her long black skirt. Her loafers scuffed and faded barely made a sound as she'd walked in. The room smelled of old coffee and polished wood, the kind of place where power hung heavy in the air. She didn't look like she belonged, not to them. Her pale skin and deep eye bags made her look like she hadn't slept in weeks. But her hands, steady and precise, moved across her notepad, catching every word. The other people in the room, lawyers, clerks, officers, barely noticed her. To them, she was furniture, a nobody, just the girl who took notes. A defense attorney, a slick guy named Carter with gelled hair and a tailored suit, tossed a file her way. "Take this down for me. Silent assistant," he said, smirking like he'd just won something. The room laughed, a sharp cutting sound that bounced off the walls. Rachel didn't flinch. She caught the file midair, her fingers brushing the red seal on the cover, and set it neatly beside her. "Hey, if this story's hitting you, can you do me a quick favor? Grab your phone, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to share these stories with you, and I want to keep walking through them together." All right, back to Rachel. It was about to get worse. The session was closed, just a handful of people allowed in. Judge Chambers, a barrel-chested man with a silver watch that screamed old money, leaned back in his chair. He had a way of looking at people like they were wasting his time. When Rachel shifted in her seat, he raised an eyebrow. "Do you even know where you are?" he said, his voice thick with disdain. A couple of clerks in the back stifled giggles. Carter, the attorney, jumped in, leaning toward a colleague with a stage whisper. "What's she doing here?" Typist?" "Janitor." The room chuckled again, louder this time. Rachel's pen paused just for a second, then kept moving. "No authority, no voice," Chambers added, waving a hand like he was swatting a fly. The words hung there, heavy, meant to sting. Rachel didn't look up. Her eyes stayed on the file, scanning the red seal like it held a secret no one else could see. A new face in the courtroom, a prosecutor named Ellen with a sharp bob and a fake smile, decided to pile on. She slid a coffee cup toward Rachel, her manicured nails tapping the table. "Since you're just sitting there, can you grab me a refill?" she asked, her tone sweet but dripping with condescension. The clerk snickered again, and one whispered, "She's probably used to fetching coffee." Rachel's fingers tightened around her pen just enough to notice, then relaxed. She slid the cup back untouched, her eyes meeting Ellen's for a brief moment. "I don't work for you," she said, her voice low and even. The room went quiet, Ellen's smile frozen. Nobody expected her to speak. Nobody expected the weight behind those 5 words. Ellen cleared her throat, looked away, and didn't ask again. Things got messy when the trial hit a snag. A system code was missing some encrypted key needed to access the case archives. The IT guys, 2 of them in ill-fitting polos, fumbled at their laptops, muttering about clearance levels. Carter tapped his pen on the table, annoyed. "This is why we don't run trials like a community college," he snapped. The room was tense, everyone waiting for someone to fix it. Rachel's fingers hovered over her keyboard. She glanced at the IT guys, then typed to 12 characters under 10 seconds. The screen flickered and the archive unlocked. A hush fell over the room. Carter's pen stopped mid-tap. One of the IT guys, a wiry kid with glasses, leaned over. "How'd you do that?" he asked, voice low. Rachel didn't answer. She just closed her laptop. A clerk in the corner, an older woman with a tight bun, leaned toward her neighbor. "Only level 5 intelligence officers know that sequence," she whispered. Heads turned, but Rachel was already back to her notes. During a break, Ellen wasn't done. She stood by the water cooler, surrounded by a few junior clerks, her voice carrying just enough to reach Rachel. "I bet she Googled that code," she said, tossing her hair. "Anyone can memorize a string if they try hard enough." The clerks laughed, one of them, mimicking Rachel's posture, slouching over an imaginary notepad. Rachel stood to refill her water bottle, her steps slow and deliberate. As she passed Ellen, she paused just for a moment and tilted the bottle slightly, letting a single drop fall onto Ellen's polished shoe. "Careful," Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. Water stains. Ellen's face flushed and the clerk stopped laughing. Rachel filled her bottle and walked back to her seat, the room watching her every step. Chambers wasn't impressed. When Rachel pointed out a flaw in Carter's argument, a small detail about jurisdiction, he laughed loud and cold. "Oh, so now you want to teach law too," he said. The room erupted, people hiding smirks behind their hands. A guard by the door, a stocky guy with a buzz cut, leaned toward another officer. "She probably used to be a secretary in a comms unit," he muttered. Rachel didn't blink. She opened her file, pulled out a single sheet, and slid it across the table. It was a hand-drawn sketch, all sharp lines and coded symbols. Nobody touched it. Carter's smirk faded. He stared at the paper like it might bite him. Rachel leaned back, her hands folded, waiting. That sketch wasn't just a drawing. It was a map detailed and precise of an operation nobody in the room was supposed to know about. The Silent Wolf mission, a CIA op so buried it didn't officially exist. Carter's face went slack. "Who gave you this?" he stammered, his voice cracking. Rachel looked at him, her gaze steady. "I wrote it," she said. Just 2 words, soft but final. Nobody laughed this time. The air felt heavier, like the room was holding its breath. A junior attorney, a woman with a nervous habit of twisting her ring, glanced at the sketch, and then at Rachel. Her hands stopped moving. Chambers slammed his gavel, calling for order, but his eyes kept darting to the paper. Nobody asked another question. They didn't dare. The next day, a senior clerk named Marcus, a man with a loud tie and an even louder laugh, decided to test the waters. He leaned over Rachel's table during a recess, pretending to adjust his glasses. "So, you're the mystery girl now, huh? What's next, pulling rabbits out of hats?" His laugh was forced, meant to draw attention. A few others joined in their eyes, flicking to Rachel for a reaction. She didn't give them one. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn notebook. She flipped it open, revealing pages of handwritten codes, each one marked with dates and coordinates. Marcus's laugh died in his throat. He stepped back, his glasses slipping down his nose. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, his voice shaky. Rachel didn't answer. She just closed the notebook and tucked it away, her movements as calm as ever. The whispers started after that. People began watching Rachel differently, like they were trying to solve a puzzle. Chambers, though, doubled down. He called for a special review, demanded a full background check. "I don't believe you're not a mole," he said, his voice booming across the courtroom. He leaned over his bench, pointing at her. "Hand over your personnel record." "Now?" Rachel slid a thin folder across the table. It was nearly empty, just a few pages. An officer, a guy with a crew cut and a permanent scowl, flipped through it. "Her file's blank for 5 years, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Chambers slammed his desk. "Where were you? Who authorized you to be here?" Rachel didn't move. Her silence was louder than his shouting. "A spy or someone hiding something?" Chambers declared, his face red. The room buzzed, but Rachel just sat there, her hands still, her eyes fixed on the table. A clerk, a quiet guy who'd been there for years, found something later that day. He was digging through old scans, stuff nobody bothered with. There it was, a faded printout, grainy but clear enough. Rachel Younger standing next to a covert ops team. She was in uniform, a medal pinned to her chest. The Phantom Echo unit, a name that made people in the know go quiet. A general in the back of the room, an older man with a limp, saw the printout and froze. "Phantom Echo," he whispered. "I thought that unit erased every trace." Chambers snatched the paper, his jaw tight. "Still unverifiable," he snapped, but his voice wasn't as steady. Rachel didn't react. She just adjusted her skirt, her fingers brushing the fabric like she was smoothing out a memory. In the back row, a man in sunglasses stood up. Nobody saw him come in. Former Admiral Turner, Phantom Echo's commander. He didn't say a word, just watched. During a tense moment in the next session, a junior officer named Daniels, all bravado and polished boots, decided to make a show. He stood up, interrupting the proceedings, and pointed at Rachel. "Why is she even here? Look at her. Does she even have clearance?" His voice was loud, meant to impress. The room turned, eyes narrowing. Rachel didn't look at him. She reached for her pen, but instead of writing, she tapped it once, twice on the table. The rhythm was deliberate, almost like a signal. Daniels faltered his confidence, cracking. The general in the back coughed a low, pointed sound. Daniels sat down, his face red, and didn't speak again. Rachel's pen went back to her notes as if nothing had happened. One afternoon, a court stenographer named Clara, a woman with a habit of chewing her pen, decided to push her luck. She leaned toward a colleague during a lull, her voice carrying across the room. "I heard she's just a glorified assistant. Probably slept her way into this job," she said, her words sharp and deliberate. The room went still, heads turning to see Rachel's reaction. Rachel was adjusting her bag, her fingers pausing on the strap. She looked up, her eyes locking onto Clara's. Without a word, she reached into her bag and pulled out a single dog tag, worn and scratched, and set it on the table. The name etched on it wasn't hers. It was a soldier's, someone from Phantom Echo. Clara's pen fell from her mouth. Nobody spoke. Rachel tucked the dog tag back into her bag and resumed her notes, the room heavier than before. Chambers wasn't done. He leaned forward, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I don't care who you were," he said. "And here I am the law." The room went still. Everyone was watching, waiting for Rachel to crack. She didn't. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, there was something new in them. Not anger, not fear, pity. It was a look that made Carter shift in his seat, made the clerk stop whispering. Chambers pressed harder. "Think I'm afraid of whatever you used to be," he said. "This is a court. You're a shadow. I am the voice." Rachel's hands stayed folded. She didn't speak. But the way she tilted her head just slightly said everything. The room felt colder, like the air had been sucked out. One morning before the session started, a bailiff named Greg, a burly guy with a loud laugh, decided to have some fun. He dropped a stack of papers on Rachel's table, letting them scatter. "Oops," he said, grinning. "Guess you're used to cleaning up messes, right?" The room chuckled, a few heads turning. Rachel knelt, gathering the papers one by one, her movements slow and precise. As she stood, she handed the stack back to Greg, but one sheet slipped out, a classified memo with a red stamp. Greg's grin vanished. He scrambled to grab it, but Rachel was faster, tucking it into the stack. "You drop this?" she said, her voice calm but sharp. Greg's hands shook as he took the papers, his laugh gone. Nobody else laughed either. It happened during a recess. Rachel was gathering her papers, her movements slow and deliberate. Chambers was still at his bench, talking to an aide. She walked past him close enough to be heard and whispered 4 words. "Sable Echo 01. Chambers froze. His face went pale, like someone had yanked the life out of him. He stood bolt upright, his chair scraping the floor. No one knows that code," he said, his voice barely audible. Rachel didn't stop. She kept walking, her loafers clicking softly. Then she paused, turned back, and met his eyes. "I heard you call it in the Syrian forest, 2 a.m., when you begged to retreat and left your men behind." The courtroom went dead silent. Nobody moved. Chambers' hands shook as he gripped the edge of his bench. Rachel closed her bag and walked out. Right after, a reporter named Lila, all sharp eyes and designer heels, cornered Rachel in the hallway. "You're the ghost, right? Got any secrets to spill?" she asked, her recorder already out. The other reporters nearby leaned in, eager for a scoop. Rachel stopped, her bag slung over her shoulder. She looked at Lila, then at the recorder, and said, "You're asking the wrong person." Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made Lila lower her recorder. The other reporters backed off, their notebooks untouched. Rachel walked away, leaving them standing there, second-guessing their approach. The fallout came fast. Within a week, military news outlets reported it. Judge Chambers resigned, no explanation given. The stories called Rachel the courtroom ghost, a shadow who'd unraveled a man with a whisper. Nobody knew how the press got the details, but they did. Carter, the slick attorney, was let go from his firm the next day. A leaked email showed him mocking classified protocols, thinking nobody would notice. The junior attorney, the one with the ring, lost her sponsorship for a big legal conference. Her name was tied to Carter's mess. The guard who'd called Rachel a secretary, his buddies stopped inviting him to drinks. He was out of the circle just like that. None of it was loud or dramatic. It was just the truth catching up, quiet and relentless. Ellen, the prosecutor, tried to keep her head high. She showed up the next week, her smile tighter than before. During a hearing, she made a point of addressing the new judge, ignoring Rachel completely. But when a file went missing, Ellen's confidence cracked. She shuffled through her papers, her hands trembling. Rachel slid a single sheet across the table, Ellen's missing file marked with a red seal. "You left this in the break room," Rachel said, her voice steady. Ellen's face burned as she took it, her smile gone. The room watched, and for once, nobody laughed at Rachel. Rachel didn't stop showing up. She was there the next week, same seat, same wrinkled blouse. The new judge, a woman with short gray hair and a no-nonsense stare, noticed her right away. During a hearing, she paused, looked at Rachel, and gave a small nod. "Ms. Monroe, we'd like to hear from you," she said. The room shifted, chairs creaking as people leaned forward. Rachel stood, her movements slow but steady, and walked to the witness stand. The courtroom rose to its feet, not because they were told to, but because they knew. She didn't say much, just answered the questions, her voice calm and clear. But the way she stood, the way her eyes scanned the room, said everything. Years ago, Rachel had been somewhere else. A dusty road, a Humvee idling nearby. She was younger, her hair tied back, her uniform crisp. A voice crackled over the radio, a call sign, Sable Echo 01. She'd been there in the dark when the orders came through, when the retreat was called, when men were left behind. She'd heard the panic, the betrayal, the silence that followed. Her hands had gripped a map marking positions nobody else could see. Now in the courtroom, her fingers brushed the edge of her notepad, the same steady hands. Nobody knew that story, not really, but the way she carried herself told enough. One day, a young intern named Sarah, barely out of college and eager to impress, made a mistake. She handed Rachel a stack of papers, then whispered to a colleague, "Why's she even touching these? She's just a nobody." The words were meant to be quiet, but they carried. Rachel paused, her hand hovering over the stack. She separated one page, a classified brief, with a redacted section, and handed it back to Sarah. "This isn't for you," she said, her voice low but firm. Sarah's face went pale as she realized the document's weight. The room watched, and Sarah's colleague stepped back, leaving her alone with her mistake. Rachel resumed sorting the papers, her expression unchanged. The courtroom changed after that day. People didn't whisper about Rachel anymore. They didn't laugh. The clerks, the ones who'd giggled at her before, now nodded when she passed. The IT guys, still embarrassed about the code, avoided her eyes. The general, the one with the limp, caught her in the hallway once. He didn't say much, just handed her a folded piece of paper. It was a photo, old and creased, of the Phantom Echo team. Rachel was in the center, her face younger, but her eyes the same. She tucked it into her bag and kept walking. Nobody asked her about it. They didn't need to. One afternoon, Marcus, the clerk with the loud tie, tried to make amends. He approached Rachel during a break, holding a coffee cup like a peace offering. "Hey, no hard feelings, right?" he said, his voice too cheerful. Rachel looked at the cup, then at him. She took it, set it on the table, and said, "I don't drink coffee." Her tone wasn't cruel, just final. Marcus stood there, his tie suddenly looking too bright, too loud. He mumbled something and walked away. His shoulders slouched. The room noticed, and for once, Marcus didn't laugh. Carter tried to save face. He showed up at the courthouse a week later, all smiles, acting like nothing had happened. He saw Rachel in the hallway and tried to make a joke. "Still typing secrets, huh?" he said, his voice too loud. Rachel didn't stop. She just looked at him, one long, steady look, and kept moving. Carter's smile faltered. He didn't come back after that. The junior attorney, the one with the ring, was quieter now. She'd been caught in the fallout, her name dragged through the same mess as Carter's. She sat in the back during hearings, twisting her ring, watching Rachel like she was trying to figure something out. She never spoke to her, though. Nobody did. The new judge ran things differently. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. When Rachel spoke now, people listened. Not because she demanded it, but because they couldn't help it. Her words were few, but they carried weight. One day during a recess, a young clerk dropped a file near her. He scrambled to pick it up, apologizing. Rachel handed it back to him, her fingers brushing the red seal. "Careful," she said, her voice soft but firm. The clerk nodded, his face red, and hurried off. The room noticed. They always did now. During a quiet moment in the courtroom, a visiting attorney named Paul, a man with a loud voice and a habit of name-dropping, decided to make his mark. He stood addressing the room and gestured toward Rachel. "I don't get it. Why is she even at this table? Is she here to take lunch orders?" His laugh echoed, expecting the room to join in. Rachel didn't look up. She opened her bag, pulled out a single key, and set it on the table. It was old military issue with a coded inscription. Paul's laugh stopped short. The general in the back leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Nobody asked about the key. Rachel tucked it away, her fingers steady, and the room went quiet. Paul's bravado fading into the silence. Rachel's husband showed up on a Tuesday. Nobody saw him coming. He walked into the courtroom tall and quiet, his coat folded over one arm. He didn't need to say his name. The air changed like a storm rolling in. Carter's replacement, a nervous guy with too many pens in his pocket, froze mid-sentence. The junior attorney looked away, her hands still. The general in the back straightened, his limp forgotten. Rachel didn't move. She just stood there, her bag in her hands, her eyes calm. Her husband nodded to her just once and took a seat in the back. Nobody spoke to him. They didn't need to. His presence was enough. The consequences kept coming. The guard who'd mocked Rachel. He was reassigned, stuck on desk duty, somewhere nobody cared about. The story about him spread quiet but sharp like a blade through gossip. The junior attorney's career stalled. She wasn't invited to the big meetings anymore. Her name left off the emails. Carter's firm issued a statement distancing themselves from him. His name started trending online for all the wrong reasons. Someone had dug up his old emails, the ones where he bragged about cutting corners. The internet did the rest. None of it was Rachel's doing. She didn't need to lift a finger. The truth was enough. One morning, Lila the reporter tried again. She waited outside the courtroom, her heels clicking as she approached Rachel. "Come on, just one quote," she said, her smile too bright. Rachel stopped, her bag slung over her shoulder. She looked at Lila, then at the notepad in her hand. "Write this," Rachel said, her voice calm. "Truth doesn't need a headline." Lila's pen froze. She didn't write it down. Rachel walked past her loafers, silent on the polished floor. The other reporters watched their cameras, still their questions forgotten. Rachel kept coming to work. Same seat, same blouse, same steady hands. The courtroom didn't laugh anymore. They watched her not out of fear, but something else. Respect, maybe. Or understanding. She didn't need to prove herself, not anymore. Her silence said it all. The way she closed her bag, the way she walked out of the room, the way her eyes met yours for just a second. It was enough. She wasn't a shadow. She was the one who'd been there, who'd seen things nobody else had. And she carried it quiet and strong every single day. This story isn't just about Rachel. It's about everyone who's been looked over, judged, pushed aside. The ones who stayed quiet, not because they were weak, but because they knew their truth didn't need shouting. You felt that, haven't you? That sting when someone assumes you're less. That weight when you hold back, knowing they'll see it someday. You weren't wrong. You weren't alone. Rachel's story is yours too. She walked through it, and so can you. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.